2 weeks ago, I, F29, hubby, M31, and son, M4, attended my BFF's, F28, wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony, and everything was going great, until BFF and her husband cut the cake. Important context: BFF did speak to me during her wedding planning about being unsure on whether or not to allow kids at her wedding. Her two sisters both have kids around son's age, and she sees him as her nephew, too. But she wanted to be able to let loose and enjoy her wedding without worrying about any kids messing things up. I gave her my opinion, saying me and hubby allowed kids at our wedding and wouldn't have it any other way. The kids were still family and deserved to be included. After that, and speaking with her sisters, she and her husband opted kids for the wedding. Now, the ceremony went swimmingly. BFF's nieces sat with me, hubby, and son, as her sisters were in the bridal party. I brought quiet activities to keep them entertained and everybody behaved. I even cried from how lovely it was. When we got to the reception, nieces were returned to their parents, so it was now just me, hubby, and son. Dinner went fine, and then the couple took to the dance floor for their first dance. Afterwards, everybody was welcomed to the floor to dance for a bit before cake cutting. At this point, the kids were running around and playing with each other, and it was a fairly secure space, and I knew almost everybody there, so I felt comfortable with son playing with the other kids while hubby and I had fun dancing. Important to mention now, hubby offered to DD so I could enjoy myself, so I had had a couple glasses of wine at this point. BFF had also been drinking and celebrating. BFF and her husband go to do cake cutting, and hubby and I are a little slow getting there, so there was a crowd blocking our view. Suddenly, I hear BFF scream son's name. Hubby and I push forward to see what's wrong. I see my son with frosting around his mouth and on his fingers. The cake had a small chunk taken out of it. I try to apologize, but BFF turns around and yells, "This is your fault. Your son ruined my cake. He's only here because you told me it would be worth it to include the kids," I yelled back, telling her that it was just an accident and the rest of the cake was still edible. That this was her nephew she was screaming about. She told me I was no friend of hers and he wasn't her nephew, in front of everyone. She told me to leave or she'd call security. Son and I were crying ATP and the three of us left. One of the bride's sisters reached out to me after and apologized for her sister's reaction, but said I needed to apologize. I think sorries are out the window now after her outburst. I told her sister so and said I expect an apology first before I'd say anything to her. Not only did she blow up at me in front of everyone, but at my son. I'm humiliated but even more angry on his behalf. So, Ita, if I refuse to apologize first? Comment 1, YTA. Your child is very young and in need of supervision. It doesn't matter how secure the location is, there are a lot of things that are not secure, like cake, glasses, etc., in the venue. Not only should you apologize, you should have apologized right then and there instead of reacting with the rest of the cake is still edible, because gross. I doubt your kid had washed his hands in a while, and it was an accident. It wasn't an accident. Your kid is young, so it wasn't malicious, but it certainly wasn't an accident. You also need to pay at least part of the cost of the cake because that tier was not edible. Comment 2. YTA. Your son taking a big bite out of the wedding cake wasn't an accident. He did it because he wanted some cake and didn't want to wait. He's 4, but you could have told him not to touch the cake. This would have been avoided if you'd been supervising him properly. You do need to apologize to your friend for being neglectful to the point where your son ruined the wedding cake. Parents like you who let their kids run rampant then don't take real responsibility are the reason so many people don't want kids at events like this. Comment 3. YTA to a raging degree, and surely you know that. Not because you advocated having kids at the wedding but because you weren't even vaguely aware of what your son was doing. Your son did ruin their cake. How you responded made you double TA, and then refusing to apologize made you triple TA. I'm so sorry your son has a parent as irresponsible and such a bad role model as you. My wife and I, both late 20s, had our first child together in June. Before he was born, there was a lot of talk about names from different family members on both sides, but the pressure to tell was on my side specifically. We didn't tell a soul what the name would be until our son was born and we had left the hospital. My parents were disappointed when we announced our son's name. My family are very traditional in how they named us. We were each named after grandparents, and that's how they feel everyone should name their kids. My wife's family don't have a tradition when it comes to naming babies. They just name them and go. No fuss or insisting on certain names. But my wife's side tends to favor more uncommon and unusual names. My wife's and my taste tends to lean a lot more to her side than to mine. Which is how we ended up choosing the name Hollis for our son. This was not something my parents liked because they expected our son to be either Jack, my dad, or Parker, my Phil. But I know they were expecting a little Jack to be born. So that added to their reaction. But they quizzed us on our choice to break tradition, and I told them it wasn't a tradition my wife's family used, and we decided we weren't going to have one either. Over the last couple of months, both parents have questioned why, have wanted to discuss other names for future babies. My mom has been the worst by far. She asked why we went with something so unlike the names we have in our family. I told her our family wasn't the only family involved, but that we also didn't take the family tastes into account. We went with what we liked. She pointed out our taste were a lot like my eels, and I said yes, but that it wasn't about my eels and their taste, it was about my wife's and my taste. I told her I was done discussing it, and since that point I now change the topic or end the conversation when she brings it up or refuses to let it go. We had a little naming ceremony on Saturday, and my mom decided she was going to dig in her heels about the name, and she told me we'd picked a stupid name and she hated it. She wanted us to change it and name him Jack or Parker. She told me we had no business breaking a long-held tradition in our family, and there's a reason those traditions are there so foolish people can't name their babies the worst names imaginable. She also said my eels must be so smug, thinking they'll have at least 2 stupidly named grandkids like they had all stupidly named kids. I lost my temper. I told her to shut up and accept that we're not naming our kids like she and Dad named me and my siblings, and I told her she would need to leave and learn to be more respectful because I would not take those insults against my wife or her family lying down. My mom hated being told to shut up, and she said I had no excuse for rudeness to her face. I thought she was crazy when she was rude. Comment 1. NTA. If your mother wants to have a say in naming a baby, then she should have another baby. She was unnecessarily rude and disrespectful to you, your wife, your eels and your child. I'd seriously consider going North Carolina with her if she doesn't change her behavior, as your son will pick up on it as he grows up, and it is not acceptable to expose your family to her. OP comment. At the very least, very low contact is being considered if she and my dad cannot let this go. I do not want them insulting my kids' names to their faces in the future. Comment 2. Well, OP, you couldn't have handled it any better. I'd send her a text or email, something written, telling her that you are aghast at her insulting spoofist, and you're leaving the ball in her court. When she presents you and your wife with a heartfelt apology for rudely overstepping and a promise never to do it again, you will resume contact. Until then, you have nothing more to say. I, 34F, have been looking after my foster daughter Mary, 13F, for over a year, ever since her parents overdosed on drugs. I also have a biological daughter Lila, 12F. Mary and Lila mostly get along, although there have been some minor arguments. A few weeks ago, the police came to Lila's school. Someone had sent an anonymous message to the school saying that Lila was in possession of drugs. After searching through her phone, locker, and bags, they realized that the drugs in question were Skittles that Lila had lying around in her bag, accidentally ripping open the packaging. Lila was terrified of the police and was traumatized by the incident. She's a very shy, quiet girl who had a panic attack at the thought of being sent to prison. While they wouldn't reveal who told on her, Lila suspected that it was Mary since she was the only one who could have seen the Skittles in her bag. Mary denied this at first, but eventually she snapped under pressure and admitted it. She said she made a mistake and was scared that Lila would overdose like her parents. I know that Mary has trauma related to drugs. But that's not an excuse. I've made it very clear that she can come talk to me about anything, even if it involves Lila, and yet she went to the school instead of telling me first. Mary said that she only went to the school in case I was biased towards Lila. She knew full well the legal ramifications of her actions, both of them could have potentially been removed from my care. I can't help but think her intentions are malicious. Skittles look absolutely nothing like drugs. She didn't even talk to me or Lila about it, she just went straight to the authorities. So I decided to ground her, stop her allowance, increase her chores, and take away her electronics for the entire summer. She's still upset with me for this, saying I went too far and I was punishing her for having trauma and trying to do the right thing. But I feel like I have a duty to teach her that it's not okay to potentially get our entire family into legal trouble over a misunderstanding. Edit. The reason I thought she had malicious intentions was because the week before, Mary coincidentally started a large argument with Lila for hanging out with Mary's crush. Lila eats candy all the time, especially Skittles, and Mary knows that Skittles are her favorite. Comment 1. NTA. However, it sounds like Mary needs therapy, and she owes Lila an apology. I think taking away her allowance and electronics is punishment enough, and maybe for only a month. A whole summer is too long. I will also say this, I don't know if Mary has been in foster care previously, but she may have decided to do this to make sure she's not sent away, which happens to foster kids all the time. You've been a good foster parent to her, so maybe, once things have settled down, let her know you're glad she's staying with you, and is a part of your family. Comment 2. I think your punishment is over the top in general, but then as a parent I also don't think I could stay looking after another child who reported my child and put them at risk. If you genuinely think it was malicious as well, even more reason to protect your child. So I guess my punishment would be worse as she wouldn't be living with me anymore. My wife, 33F, and I, 35M, have been married for 4 years and have 2 sons, 3 and 1. With 2 young kids and both of us working full-time, we obviously don't get a lot of time for ourselves and even less for the 2 of us as a couple. We've had maybe 2 dates since our youngest was born. My wife has at least been able to attend a couple of her friends' weddings, but I haven't had social time just for myself in probably 6 months. My wife has been lamenting our lack of social lives and asked me to plan something for us to do as a couple because she doesn't have the mental energy for it. A few weeks ago I saw that one of her favorite bands is playing a show in a town we used to live in before we got married. We still have friends there, so I reached out to them to see if they would want to attend the show with us. They agreed and even offered for my wife and I to stay with them for a night so we wouldn't have to drive home after the show. I told my wife about it, and instead of being happy or excited, she immediately went off about how we have no one to watch the kids, we've never both been away from them for a night, etc. I told her that I had already asked my parents to come stay with the kids for a night and they were excited for it. But my wife kept going off about how our kids haven't been sleeping well, what if X, Y, or Z happens, etc. I did my best to calm her down and asked her if I should just cancel the whole thing, because it doesn't sound like she's on board with my idea. She said she wants to do it, but she's just worried about leaving the kids for a night. I told her that this plan is literally exactly what she asked me to do, but if she doesn't want to do it, then we can cancel. She again said she didn't want to cancel. Well, the concert was this past Saturday. My parents arrived Friday so that they could have a night with us and the kids at home to get familiar with our routine. Everything went fine that night. But, the next day as we were getting things packed up and ready to go, my wife became hesitant. Instead of packing, she was running around asking my mom and dad a bunch of questions related to the kids. I tried to get her to focus on the concert and seeing friends, but I couldn't do it. Eventually, I asked her if she still wanted to go. She said she wasn't sure. She told me she was feeling guilty about leaving the kids overnight. I told her that we both need to have time for us to behave like adults, and this is our chance. She then told me that I should just go by myself because she doesn't think she will enjoy herself. So, that's what I did. I went and saw friends and spent the night and had a great time. When I got home the next day, my wife was upset with me. She told me she didn't think I would actually go without her. She said having my parents there without me was uncomfortable for her. She told me I should have done more to soothe her mom guilt so that she could have gone with. Comment 1. NTA. I was prepared to go another way, but you did exactly what she asked of you and you facilitated the obstacles by finding free lodging and safe kid care. The only work left for her was the mental work to go, and her choice was not to. While it was her right not to go, she can't be angry that you did. There was no reason that required you both miss the concert. Comment 2. NTA. You made all the arrangements and took care of everything, she can't expect you to do more. Sometimes you have to take a step back and let her handle her own feelings.